The maze that had no end. The first thing I noticed wasn't the walls. It was the silence, not the kind you hear late at night. This silence felt heavy, like the air itself refused to move. Even my breathing sounded too loud. I stood perfectly still. Gray stone walls stretched far above me, disappearing into darkness. The corridor beneath my feet was built from enormous slabs of worn rock, each carved with thin white lines that shimmered faintly whenever I shifted my weight. I turned slowly. The passage behind me was identical to the one ahead. No entrance, no exit, just endless stone. A sharp ache pulsed behind my eyes as I searched my memory. I remembered everything. My home, my family. The last conversation I'd had, walking through a narrow trail during a weekend hiking trip. Then, nothing, no blackout, no strange light, no feeling of being dragged away. One moment I had been walking, the next, I was here. Hello, the voice echoed through the corridor. Not an echo, several echoes. Like the maze repeated the word from places much farther away than it should have. I followed the sound. After several turns, the corridor widened into a circular chamber. 9 other people were already there. Some stood against the walls, others spun in circles, searching for another exit. No one looked injured, just confused. A tall man in his 30s broke the silence. So, he rubbed the back of his neck, I guess none of us knows how we got here. No one answered. A woman folded her arms. If this is someone's idea of a prank, it's not funny. An older man shook his head. I've searched every corridor connected to this room. There isn't a way out. Another voice came from behind me. There wasn't a room here a minute ago. Everyone looked toward the speaker. A young woman with short black hair stood frozen near the entrance I'd just used. What do you mean? I walked down a straight hallway. She pointed behind herself. When I turned around, there was this room. Nobody laughed, because each of us had arrived from a different direction. That shouldn't have been possible. The room only had 4 passages, yet 10 people claimed to have entered from different ones. I looked around, faces filled with the same question that sat in my own mind. Where were we? A sudden scraping sound echoed overhead. Every head snapped upward. Dust drifted from the ceiling. For several long seconds, nothing happened. Then the sound stopped. The silence returned. The older man cleared his throat. My name's Victor. I'm 58. I don't know any more than the rest of you. One by one, everyone introduced themselves. Maya, Noah, Elena, Ryan, Lucas. Sophia, Daniel, Emma, and finally, my name's Ethan. 9 strangers, no familiar faces. No one recognized anyone else. That made things strangely worse. If we'd all been taken from different places. How? Ryan frowned. We shouldn't stand around. If there's a way in, there has to be a way out. No one argued. We chose one corridor and began walking together. The walls never changed. Gray stone, white glowing carvings, perfectly smooth corners. No cracks, no moss. Nothing to suggest how old the maze really was. After nearly 20 minutes, we reached another chamber, except it was the same one. Victor frowned. Impossible. We didn't turn around. Lucas pointed toward the floor. Our footprints. They were everywhere, fresh. We had somehow walked in a giant loop, except there hadn't been any intersections that could create one. The corridor had been almost perfectly straight. Nobody spoke for several seconds. Then Noah knelt beside one wall. I'm marking this. He pulled a pocket knife from his backpack and carved a deep X into the stone. The blade screeched. Tiny sparks flew. The mark remained. Now we'll know. We left through another passage. This time, I counted every turn, left, straight, right, another chamber, different, at least, I thought it was, until I noticed the X. It stared back at us from the wall, exactly where Noah had carved it. Sophia slowly backed away. No, that's not possible. We took a completely different route. Daniel looked around. I counted 2. So did I. Victor's face hardened. This maze doesn't follow normal geometry. Nobody liked hearing those words, because every one of us already believed them. We just hadn't wanted to say them aloud. Hours passed. We searched every corridor we found. Every path eventually returned to the marked chamber, sometimes after 5 minutes, sometimes after nearly an hour. The distance changed. The destination never did. Eventually we stopped. Exhaustion settled over the group. Emma slid down against the wall. So, we're trapped. Nobody answered, because nobody had a better word. I checked my watch. The second hand had stopped. Every phone told a different time. None had a signal. Some batteries were almost full. Others had dropped below 20% despite barely being used. Lucas sighed. At least we've got flashlights. He switched his phone's light on. The beam flickered, then died. Battery. 100%. The light simply refused to work. One by one, everyone tried. None of them worked. Only the strange white lines carved into the stone continued glowing softly, enough to see, never enough to feel comfortable. Victor stood. We need supplies. Water, food, a place to rest. We won't survive otherwise. Nobody argued. We searched again this time. We stopped paying attention to exits. Instead, we searched every wall, every floor tile. Every corner. Nearly 2 hours later, Maya called out, "I found something." We hurried toward her. Hidden behind a narrow bend stood a wooden door, the first thing in the maze that wasn't made of stone, no handle. Only a circular symbol carved into the center, 3 rings surrounding a single dot. Sophia reached toward it. Victor grabbed her wrist. "Wait! What if it's trapped?" She hesitated. "Fair point." Ryan examined the carving. "No keyhole, no hinges." I stepped closer. The symbol looked strangely familiar, not because I'd seen it before, but because it felt intentional, like it wasn't decoration. Without thinking, I placed my hand on the center. The stone beneath my palm felt warm. A deep rumble echoed through the corridor. Everyone jumped back. The door slowly swung inward. Nobody spoke. The room beyond looked untouched. Shelves lined the walls, clay jars, old wooden crates. Bundles wrapped in cloth. Daniel whispered, "Food." Victor carefully opened one crate, dried fruit. Another, sealed bottles of water. Another, blankets. Emma laughed, not because anything was funny, because relief finally overwhelmed her. We searched everything. Enough food for several days. More water than we'd expected. Simple medical supplies. Candles, rope, old lanterns, but no matches, no explanation, no note. Nothing, only supplies, almost as though someone had expected people to arrive. That thought unsettled me more than finding nothing at all. Night, or what felt like night, eventually came. The glowing lines throughout the maze dimmed until they barely illuminated the corridors. We decided to stay inside the storage room. One entrance, easy to watch. Lucas volunteered for the first watch. The rest of us tried to sleep. I don't know how long I'd been asleep when I woke. Something felt wrong, not dangerous. Different. I opened my eyes. The room was silent. Everyone else still slept. Lucas stood near the doorway, completely motionless, staring outside. I quietly stood beside him. "What is it?" He didn't answer. Instead, he pointed down the corridor, far away. Beyond the fading light, someone was walking. A single figure, too far away to identify. They moved slowly, never looking toward us, just walking across an intersection. Then disappearing behind another wall. I counted 1, 2, 3 seconds, no footsteps, no sound at all. Lucas swallowed. "Did you?" "I saw it." Neither of us moved. We waited. Nothing. Finally, Ryan woke. "What happened?" Lucas explained. Ryan grabbed one of the lanterns. "We should check." Victor immediately shook his head. "No, if someone else is trapped," Ryan argued. "If someone else is trapped, they'll still be trapped in 5 minutes. We don't know what we saw." That ended the discussion. Morning, or whatever passed for morning inside the maze, arrived when the glowing lines brightened again. The corridor where we'd seen the figure was empty. No footprints. No signs anyone had ever been there. The group quietly packed the supplies. Nobody mentioned the figure again until Noah suddenly stopped walking. His face had turned pale. He slowly pointed toward the wall beside us. Fresh scratches covered the stone, not random marks, words written in deep, uneven lines. None of us had seen them yesterday. The message read, "Follow the footsteps." Silence settled over us. Daniel frowned. "Who wrote that?" No one answered because beneath the words, stone dust still rested on the floor as though they had been carved. Only moments ago, no one moved. The message seemed too fresh to belong in a place that looked centuries old. Victor crouched beside the wall and brushed a finger through the pale stone dust. "It wasn't here yesterday." "No," Noah replied quietly. "I would have noticed." Ryan looked down both corridors. "So someone else is here." "Or something," Emma whispered. Nobody answered. I stepped closer to the carving. The letters were uneven, as if whoever had written them had been in a hurry. "Don't follow the footsteps, not beware, not run, just don't follow them." Lucas glanced around. "I don't hear anything." As if the maze had been waiting for those words, a single footstep echoed somewhere ahead. Tap. Every head turned toward the sound. Then another. Tap, tap. It wasn't running, it wasn't limping. It sounded like someone walking at a calm, steady pace. The footsteps echoed through the corridors, impossible to place. Left, right, ahead, behind. The maze twisted every sound until none of us could tell where it came from. Then, they stopped. Victor exhaled. "We keep moving," nobody argued. The corridors ahead were unlike the ones we'd already explored. The glowing white lines no longer ran straight. They curved across the walls in intricate patterns, crossing one another like rivers seen from above. Sophia traced one with her fingertips. "It's warmer." She wasn't wrong. The stone itself felt slightly warm where the glowing lines passed through it. Not enough to burn, just enough to notice. Daniel looked upward. Has the ceiling always been this high? I followed his gaze. It hadn't. The ceiling stretched so far into darkness that the faint glow never reached it. The maze suddenly felt much larger, much older, and much less interested in making sense. Another hour passed. This time, the corridors never looped. Instead, they kept branching. Left, right, straight. Each choice looked identical. Noah marked every intersection with his knife. Simple arrows, small enough not to waste time. When we reached the next intersection, every mark was gone. The walls were smooth again. No scratches, no dust, nothing. Ryan stared in disbelief. I carved those. I watched you, Maya replied. Victor folded his arms. The maze doesn't like being marked. So how are we supposed to remember where we've been? Emma asked. Nobody had an answer. By what we guessed was midday, hunger forced us to stop. We shared dried fruit and small portions of water. Nobody ate much. Everyone wanted to save as much as possible. While we rested, Elena noticed something carved into one of the floor stones. Not words, numbers, Roman numerals, VII 7. The carving looked ancient, worn by time. Victor frowned. That's the first thing we found that wasn't made recently. What do you think it means? Maya asked. I don't know, but I don't believe it's random. We searched the surrounding corridor. Nothing. Only that single stone, 7. We continued walking. Then, the corridor ended, not in a wall, not in another chamber. It simply stopped. Beyond the last stone lay open sky. Everyone froze. Fresh air drifted toward us. Clouds floated overhead. Sunlight spilled into the corridor. Ryan smiled for the first time. We found it. He rushed forward. Victor shouted after him. Wait! Too late. Ryan stepped beyond the stone floor and disappeared, not fell, didn't scream, didn't trip. He simply vanished, gone, as if he'd never existed. Emma gasped. Ryan! Lucas ran to the edge and dropped to one knee. What? There was nothing, no cliff, no ground, only endless white mist beyond the final stone. Victor grabbed Lucas before he could lean farther. Nobody crosses. Ryan's backpack lay on the floor exactly where he'd vanished, nothing else. Silence filled the corridor. We waited. 1 minute. 5, 10, Ryan never returned. Nobody spoke for a long time after that. The maze had claimed its first person. Not through violence, not through monsters. He'd simply stepped somewhere he shouldn't have. Victor quietly picked up Ryan's backpack. We keep this. If he's alive, he'll need it. No one argued, though none of us believed we'd ever see him again. That evening we found another chamber. Unlike the others, this one contained something in the center, a stone pedestal. Resting upon it, a compass, old, bronze, untouched by rust. Daniel picked it up carefully. The needle spun wildly. It never settled. North, south, east, west, round and round. It doesn't work. Victor shook his head. Maybe it isn't pointing north. He slowly rotated the compass. The needle continued spinning, then stopped. Everyone stared. The needle pointed directly at me. I frowned. What? Daniel laughed nervously. That's weird. I took one step sideways. The needle moved with me, always pointing toward my chest. Lucas frowned. Give it here. Daniel handed him the compass. The moment Lucas held it, the needle spun again, then stopped. Pointing toward Maya, she blinked. Why me? Victor reached for it. Again the needle spun. This time, it pointed toward Noah. Each time someone different held the compass. It pointed to a different person, never the same one twice. Nobody understood why. Eventually Victor wrapped it in cloth and stored it inside his backpack. We're not leaving it behind. Hours later, the footsteps returned. Tap, 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 closer this time. Everyone woke instantly. No one needed to say anything. We all heard them, slow, steady, walking somewhere beyond the nearest corridor. Emma whispered, they're outside. Lucas tightened his grip on a metal rod he'd found earlier. The footsteps stopped. A long silence followed. Then, another sound, stone scraping against stone, not loud, just enough to hear, as if something heavy had shifted. Victor carefully approached the doorway. He looked left, then right. Nothing. The corridor was empty. The footsteps had vanished again. Morning came, or at least the maze brightened once more when we stepped outside. The storage room was gone. Only a blank stone wall remained. Emma turned in circles. No, it was right here. The supplies we'd carried with us were still there. Everything left inside had vanished with the room. Victor closed his eyes for a moment. The maze gives, the maze takes. Nobody liked how true that sounded. Late that day, we reached our first staircase. It spiraled downward. Far below, darkness swallowed everything. Sophia hesitated. We've only been walking on one level. Victor nodded. Maybe the exit isn't. We descended. The air grew colder. The glowing lines became brighter after hundreds of steps. The staircase ended. The chamber below was enormous, the largest room we'd seen, dozens of corridors connected to it. In the exact center stood a massive stone pillar. Every side of the pillar was covered in carvings. Ancient symbols, circles, stars, animals, hands, eyes. None of us recognized the language, except, near the bottom, someone had carved English words over the older markings, very carefully, as though they wanted future visitors to understand. I brushed dust away until the message became clear. The maze cannot be defeated. It can only be understood. Every change follows a rule. Find the rules before the seventh dawn. A chill ran through me. It matched the feeling I'd had since arriving. Nothing here was random, impossible. Yes, random. No, Victor stared at the words. So whoever wrote this, they survived long enough to learn something. But not long enough to leave, Noah finished. No one argued, because there was no second message, no farewell, no directions, just a warning. As we prepared to search the chamber, Maya suddenly raised a hand. Wait! She was staring at the stone floor. I followed her gaze. The dust around the pillar had been undisturbed, except for one trail, fresh footprints, only one set. They circled the pillar once, then disappeared halfway across the floor. No doorway, no wall, no crack. The footprints simply ended, exactly as if the person walking had vanished into thin air. Everyone remembered the warning carved into the wall. Don't follow the footsteps. No one took another step. No one spoke. The footprints ended in the middle of the chamber where nothing but smooth stone surrounded them. Victor stepped closer but stopped several feet away. Nobody crosses them, Lucas frowned. They're just footprints. And Ryan was just taking one step, Victor replied. The room fell silent again. None of us needed another reminder. Ryan hadn't screamed. He hadn't fallen. He had simply ceased to exist. I studied the trail more carefully. The footprints weren't deep. Whoever had made them wasn't carrying much weight. They circled the pillar once, paused near the carvings, then walked toward the center of the chamber. And disappeared. Not faded, not turned around, just ended. Maya looked up at the pillar. I think they wanted us to notice something. What? She pointed to one section of the carvings. Unlike the others, that section had 7 circles carved in a straight line. 6 of them were empty. The 7th contained a small star. 7 again, Daniel murmured. Nobody liked how often that number appeared. We spent the next hour examining every inch of the chamber. The maze rewarded patience. That much had become clear. Near the base of the pillar, Emma discovered a narrow crack. It was barely wide enough for a hand. Inside, she pulled out a small leather notebook. Its cover had almost crumbled away. The pages were yellow with age. Victor opened it carefully. Most of the writing had faded beyond recognition. Only a handful of entries could still be read. The first page simply said, Day 2 the maze changes, but never without reason. Several pages later. Day 4 the footsteps belong to no one. They appear before every change. Another entry, Day 5 never trust an exit you cannot touch. And the final readable page, Day 6 if you hear the bell. Hide, that was it. No name. No explanation. The remaining pages were either blank or too damaged to read. Emma closed the notebook slowly. There were people here before us, Victor nodded, and they learned more than we have. We left the chamber with the notebook and continued deeper into the maze. For the first time since arriving, the corridors weren't silent. A faint sound drifted through the stone, not footsteps, not scraping, a bell, soft, distant, one clear note. Dong! Every person froze. The notebook flashed through my mind. If you hear the bell, hide, Victor reacted instantly. Into the nearest corridor. We rushed into the first passage we found. It narrowed after only a few steps. Barely enough room for all of us to press against the walls. The bell rang again, closer. Dong! The air suddenly felt colder. The glowing lines dimmed. Nobody dared speak. Then, the maze moved, not violently, not with a deafening crash. A deep vibration passed through the walls beneath our hands. Stone ground against stone somewhere beyond the corridor. The sound continued for nearly a minute. Then, silence. Victor waited another full minute before stepping back into the main chamber. Everything had changed. Half the corridors were gone, new ones had appeared, even the massive pillar stood in a different position. Daniel stared in disbelief. It moved. No, Victor said quietly. The maze moved around it, for the first time. We had witnessed one of its changes. The bell hadn't warned us of danger. It had warned us that the maze was about to rearrange itself. As we entered one of the new passages, Noah suddenly stopped. There, a symbol had been carved into the wall, 3 circles joined by a single line. The same symbol from the wooden door we'd found on our first day, except this one glowed faintly. I reached toward it. Victor grabbed my wrist. Wait, we don't know what it does. I hesitated. He was right. Instead, Maya carefully touched the symbol with the tip of a metal rod. Nothing happened. She placed her hand against it. Still nothing. Finally, I stepped forward. The moment my palm touched the carving, the glow spread across the wall. Thin white lines raced through the stone like veins. A low rumble echoed around us. Then, part of the wall slid aside. Behind it lay a narrow room. Unlike the storage room we'd found before, this chamber contained only one thing. A map. Not of the maze, just a single section. Several corridors had been drawn in black ink. One path had been marked in red. At the bottom, someone had written, "The shortest path is rarely the safest." Victor carefully rolled the map and placed it inside his backpack. We keep everything, even if it doesn't make sense yet. Hours later, fatigue caught up with us. We decided to rest in another circular chamber. Everyone looked exhausted. Nobody talked much anymore. The maze had a way of stealing conversation. While the others slept, I volunteered to keep watch. Time passed slowly. Or perhaps it didn't pass at all. Without the sun, it was impossible to know. I walked slow circles around the chamber, listening, watching, thinking. Then I heard breathing, not my own, someone else's. I spun toward the nearest corridor. Nothing. The breathing continued, slow, steady, almost directly beside me. I raised the lantern. The chamber was empty except for the others. The sound stopped. I lowered the lantern. It returned. My heartbeat quickened. I followed it down the corridor. 10 steps, 20, 30. The breathing grew louder. Then I rounded a corner. The corridor ended at a stone wall. No one was there. No hiding places. No doors. Nothing. The breathing vanished. I stared at the wall for several seconds before turning back. The chamber was gone. I stopped walking. The corridor behind me wasn't the one I'd come through. There were now 2 intersections that hadn't existed before. Cold spread through my chest. The bell, I whispered. Had it rung? Had I somehow missed it? Ethan, Victor's voice echoed faintly. Far away, I shouted back. I'm here. No answer, only echoes. I ran toward the nearest intersection. Left. Another corridor, another turn. No chamber, no people, just endless stone. Panic threatened to take over. I forced myself to breathe. Running blindly wouldn't help. The maze had rules. If it had separated me, there had to be a way back. I slowed down, listened. Nothing. Then, tap, a single footstep ahead. The warning carved into the wall flashed through my mind. Follow the footsteps. I stood perfectly still. Another step, closer, tap. Whoever or whatever was making them wasn't rushing. It seemed content to wait. The sound moved past the next intersection. I never looked. I kept my eyes on the floor until the footsteps faded away. Only then did I continue walking. Minutes later, I saw light, not the maze's glow. A lantern. Victor, Ethan. Relief flooded his face as he hurried over. We've been looking everywhere. The corridor changed, I said. So did ours, Maya replied. We woke up and you were gone. I never heard the bell. Victor looked at me carefully. Neither did we. That answer unsettled me more than anything else. The maze didn't always warn you before it changed. Later, after everyone had calmed down, we compared what had happened. Something didn't add up. According to Victor, I'd been missing for less than 10 minutes. To me, it had felt like nearly an hour. Daniel frowned. So time changes too? No, Victor said slowly. I think, he looked around the corridor, I think different parts of the maze experience time differently. No one liked that explanation, mostly because it fit. As we prepared to move again, Emma suddenly gasped. She was staring behind us. We all turned. A new message had appeared on the wall, freshly carved. Stone dust still rested beneath it. The words were shorter than before. The maze is listening. The corridor became deathly silent. No footsteps, no bell, no movement, just those 4 words. None of us knew whether they were a warning or a rule we had already broken. None of us spoke after reading the new message. The maze is listening. The letters were jagged, carved so deeply that small fragments of stone still lay scattered beneath them. Daniel looked over his shoulder. Did any of us hear someone carving that? No, not a sound. It had appeared while all 10 of us were standing only a few steps away. Victor let out a slow breath. Whether the message is true or not, he looked at each of us. ... From now on, we stop shouting. No one argued. If the maze really could hear us, there was no reason to test it. We continued in silence. The corridors became narrower as we walked. The glowing white lines that had once stretched neatly across the walls now twisted into tangled patterns, crossing over one another like roots beneath the earth. The air grew colder. I rubbed my arms, then I noticed something strange. Our footsteps didn't echo anymore. Each step landed in complete silence. I looked at Maya. She'd noticed it too. She mouthed a single word. Why? I shook my head. No idea. After what felt like another hour, the passage opened into a long gallery. Stone statues stood along both sides, human figures, dozens of them, each carved with incredible detail. Their expressions were different: fear, hope, relief. Confusion. Some reached forward with open hands, others covered their faces. Sophia stepped closer to one. "It almost looks—" She stopped. The statue's eyes, they weren't carved, they looked almost real. Victor immediately stepped between her and the statue. "Don't touch them." She nodded and stepped back. None of us wanted to risk it. We walked through the gallery slowly. Every statue faced the center of the corridor, watching, waiting, as if they had been expecting us. Near the end of the gallery stood another stone pillar. Unlike the last one, this one contained a single sentence carved into its base. "Every path remembers those who walked it." Emma read it twice. "What does that even mean?" Nobody answered. Beyond the gallery, the maze split into 3 passages. One sloped upward, one remained level, one descended into darkness. Victor removed the folded map we'd found earlier. The red path crossed a symbol identical to the one carved above the downward corridor. He looked at us. "This is the only direction we've ever had." Lucas nodded. "We follow the map." So we did. The staircase spiraled downward for what felt like forever. The deeper we went, the quieter everything became. Even breathing sounded distant. Then, we reached water. A perfectly still underground lake stretched across an enormous cavern. The maze continued on the opposite side. Between us and the far shore stood only a narrow stone bridge. No railing, barely wide enough for one person. Victor tested it first. The bridge held. One by one we crossed. Halfway across, I glanced down. The water reflected the ceiling. But not us. I stopped. My reflection should have been there instead. The surface showed only empty bridge. I quickly looked at Maya. She wasn't reflected either. None of us were. I didn't say anything until we reached the other side. When I finally mentioned it, everyone turned back. The water now reflected all of us perfectly, as if nothing had been wrong. No one suggested going back to check. Hours later, exhaustion forced us to stop again. We ate quietly. The supplies were running low. Victor spread the notebook, the map, and the compass on the floor. "The maze follows rules. We know that. The bell means it's about to change. The footsteps appear before something disappears. The symbols open hidden rooms. The messages appear for a reason." He tapped the notebook. "But we're missing the most important rule." "How do we leave?" Silence. Then Maya slowly picked up the compass. It had remained wrapped in cloth since we'd found it. She held it flat in her palm. The needle spun wildly, then stopped. Pointing toward Victor, Victor frowned. "That's new." He took the compass. Again it spun. Again. It pointed toward him. Lucas took it. Still Victor. Daniel took it. Still Victor. Everyone tried. The needle no longer changed. It pointed to the same person every time. Victor stared at the compass. "I don't think it's pointing at me." "It's pointing." He turned around. The needle shifted with him, always aiming at the same direction beyond his shoulder. Toward one corridor for the first time. The compass wasn't choosing a person. It was choosing a path. Victor slowly stood. "I think it's showing us where to go." No one objected. It was the first clue that had ever changed. And it had changed now, for a reason. The corridor it led us through was unlike any we'd seen. The walls were covered with thousands of tiny carvings, names, hundreds of them, perhaps thousands, different languages, different handwriting. Different centuries. Some names had dates, some didn't. One thing united them all. Every name had been scratched into the stone by human hands. Emma whispered, "They were all here." I swallowed hard. "Every one of them?" Near the end of the corridor, one section of the wall remained empty, completely smooth. As if waiting, no one spoke. We walked faster. The compass guided us into a vast circular chamber. It was larger than anything we'd seen. Above us, for the first time, I could see the sky, real sky. Clouds drifted slowly overhead through a perfectly round opening. Sunlight poured into the chamber. In the center stood an enormous stone archway. Empty, no door, no gate, just an arch. The compass needle stopped moving. Victor smiled faintly. "I think we found it." Before anyone could step forward, dong the bell once. Louder than ever. The floor trembled beneath our feet. Stone groaned in every direction. The maze was changing. Again, this time, the chamber itself. Corridors shifted. Walls slid. The archway slowly began turning, not disappearing, rotating, as if trying to face another direction. Victor shouted, "Move!" We ran. The stone beneath us continued shifting. Cracks spread across the floor. One corridor collapsed entirely. Dust filled the air. Lucas stumbled, but Noah grabbed his arm before he fell into the widening gap. The archway kept turning, slowly, steadily, almost out of reach. Maya reached it first. She stopped. "Victor, it isn't open." The center of the arch shimmered faintly, like clear water standing upright. Victor looked at the notebook, then at the arch. His eyes widened. The maze cannot be defeated. It can only be understood. He looked at us. We've been trying to outrun it, but every clue was teaching us its rules. He stepped toward the shimmering light. Nothing happened. Then he turned back. We all leave together. No one stays behind. One by one, we joined him beneath the arch. The light brightened. The maze stopped shaking. Everything became completely still. The shimmering surface rippled. Then, the world vanished. I hit solid ground. Fresh air filled my lungs. Bright sunlight warmed my face. I opened my eyes. Grass, trees. Mountains, the maze was gone. 9 of us lay scattered across a quiet valley. Victor slowly sat up. Emma laughed through tears. Maya covered her face with both hands for several minutes. No one said a word. We simply stared at the empty landscape where a maze large enough to swallow worlds should have stood. There was nothing, not even ruins, just untouched earth. Daniel looked around. Ryan, silence answered him. Ryan had never returned. Whether he'd survived somewhere else or become another mystery of the maze, none of us could say. Victor opened his backpack, the notebook. Gone, the map, gone, the compass, gone. Only Ryan's backpack remained inside it. A single stone rested at the bottom, small enough to fit in a hand. Its surface bore one familiar symbol, 3 circles surrounding a single dot. No one remembered placing it there. Victor picked it up. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the symbol gave off the faintest white glow. Just once, before fading forever. None of us touched it again. We left the valley together without looking back. Sometimes, even now, I wonder what would have happened if we'd ignored the messages. If we'd followed the footsteps. Or if we'd crossed that impossible white horizon like Ryan had. I don't know, and I don't think I ever will, but one thing has never left me. The maze never lied. Every warning it gave us was true. Every impossible change followed a rule. We escaped because, eventually, we stopped treating it like an enemy and started treating it like a place that had existed long before us. A place that demanded patience instead of defiance. Years have passed since then. People ask why I refuse to hike alone, why I never enter caves, why I always stop when I hear a bell echo through an empty place. I always smile and tell them it's just an old habit. They laugh. I laughed too, because telling them the truth would change nothing. They wouldn't believe me. I probably wouldn't have believed it either. Until the day I walked into a maze. That had no end. End of story.